10-minute murder.
Seath Jackson was just like any other teenager, growing up in Florida during the 2000s. He had 2 older brothers, attended the nearby Bellevue High School, and he wanted to be an MMA fighter when he grew up. When he was 14 years old, Seath started a relationship with a girl from school. Her name was Amber Wright. The 2 of them dated for about 3 months, and as far as relationships went, for teenagers, it was serious. But Seath had some doubts about Amber's loyalty to him. She was spending an awful lot of time with an older boy, 18-year-old Michael Bargo. Seath became convinced that Amber was cheating on him with Michael, so he ended their relationship in early 2011. The breakup was not amicable. Both Seath and Amber desperately wanted to make the other one jealous, and Seth's fears were confirmed when Amber started dating Michael only a few weeks later. Michael was convinced that Seath and Amber's relationship had been abusive and began harassing Seath himself. Michael viewed himself as kind of a tough guy. He carried a gun with him for self-defense wherever he went, and he already had a criminal record for petty theft. It meant that when Michael showed up at Seth's house one day and told him, "I have a bullet with your name on it," it wasn't just an empty threat. In April 2011, Michael and one of his friends, 16-year-old Kyle Hooper, decided that they wanted to fight Seath. They told Seath to bring a friend and meet them in a nearby trailer where the fight would take place. Seath, being an aspiring MMA fighter, agreed, but when he showed up to the trailer, he heard a gunshot nearby. Michael had shot his revolver at the 2 boys, which he said was because he wanted to scare them off a bit. It worked, and Seath and his friend quickly left and went home. Michael might have succeeded in scaring Seath, but he wasn't done. On the 17th of April, he sat his friend Kyle Hooper down and told him, quote, "I need to kill Seath." Kyle agreed to the plan. He also disliked Seath, who had allegedly threatened to set fire to Kyle's house. The 2 boys decided to get more of their friends involved in the plan. 18-year-old Charlie Ely, who lived in the trailer that Michael had invited Seath to, and 20-year-old Justin Soto. Knowing that Amber was on bad terms with Seath, the group also told Amber that they planned to kill him, which she agreed to. Michael suggested that Amber should lure Seath back to Charlie's trailer again. The rest of the group would hide nearby and overpower Seath so that Michael could shoot him. The murder plan was only a few hours old, but the group saw no reason to wait. They wanted to kill Seath that night. As planned, Amber sent Seath a text message, letting him know that she wanted to meet him at Charlie's trailer so the pair could work things out. She asked him to keep their conversation a secret, hoping that he wouldn't tell anybody that he was planning to meet her that night. It wasn't unusual for the teenagers to be spending time at Charlie's trailer. It was a frequent hangout for them and their friends, so this wasn't enough of a reason for Seath to be suspicious. However, the last time Seath had been to the trailer, he'd also been shot at, so he didn't completely trust Amber's intentions. So Seath replied to the text message saying, quote, "Amber, if you have me jumped, I will never give you the time of day." Amber knew that Seath still had feelings for her, so she tried to manipulate him into trusting her, telling him, "I could never do that to you. I just want me and you back." Finally, Seath was convinced, and he agreed to meet her at the trailer that night. When Seath arrived, he was immediately ambushed. Kyle grabbed a heavy piece of wood and hit him over the head. Michael aimed his gun at Seath and began to fire. Seath was wounded, but he tried to escape, managing to stagger outside. Justin Soto chased after him and dragged him down to the ground. Michael followed behind, continuing to shoot at Seath until he was confident that his victim was not going to escape. Then Michael, Justin, and Kyle picked up Seath, carrying him inside the trailer while he struggled. Finally, Michael aimed his .22 caliber Heritage revolver directly at Seath's face and pulled the trigger. Seath died instantly. Michael and Justin wasted no time in wrapping his body in a sleeping bag and then threw it into a fire pit in the yard. They watched the body burn together for a while, and when Michael and Justin went to bed, Kyle stood guard by the fire pit until the sun came up. Before the murder took place, the group of killers had told one other person, Amber Wright's ex-stepfather, James Havens. James had not intervened with the plan or called the police. Instead, he agreed to help the boys get away with the crime. Early in the morning, James arrived at the trailer. He brought his truck, loaded up with cleaning supplies, cables, and cinder blocks. The group of killers divided up their tasks. Some of them scrubbed the trailer with bleach to remove Seath's blood, while the rest of them scooped up the charred remains out of the fire pit and into buckets. They loaded those buckets into James' truck. Michael asked James to drive them to Ocala, where he planned on dumping the remains into a flooded quarry. Seath's family had quickly noticed that he was missing, and by the evening of April 18th, he was featured on the local news as a missing person. His killers had vowed to keep their crime a secret, but when Kyle Hooper saw the news report, he couldn't take it anymore. He confessed the entire thing to his mother, who then called the authorities. Within hours, the rest of the killers were tracked down and arrested, but Michael Bargo was nowhere to be found. Initially, Kyle, Amber, and Charlie all tried to blame Michael for the crime, but during their police interrogations, the real story was revealed. When the group was placed in the same holding cell, they talked about the crime together, agreeing that Seath deserved to be killed. Meanwhile, Michael didn't show any remorse for what he had done. After fleeing the scene, he went to stay with family of one of his friends, and while he was there, he bragged about the murder to 5 different people. He even seemed proud as he told them about breaking Seath's kneecaps so that he could stuff his body into the sleeping bag. Fortunately, Michael's time on the run was short. The following day, police located him and placed him under arrest as well. After searching the crime scene, investigators found Michael's gun and spare ammunition, as well as small pieces of Seath's remains that had been left in the fire pit. Michael had been confident that nobody would ever find the remains he'd dumped at the quarry, but when the search team arrived, they quickly noticed one of the large buckets floating on the water's surface. The cinder block that had been used to weigh it down had come loose. Now that they knew what they were looking for, the searchers quickly recovered the remaining 2 buckets at the bottom of the quarry. Seath's remains had been severely burned, so DNA analysis was required to prove the body belonged to him. A team of DNA analysts and forensic anthropologists analyzed samples from the buckets and the fire pit, and were able to confirm that the remains in both locations belonged to the same person. After comparing the DNA with samples taken from Seath's family, they confirmed what law enforcement already knew. The remains in the bucket belonged to Seath. All but one of the killers had been a teenager at the time of Seath's murder, but the prosecution quickly decided that all of the perpetrators should be tried as adults. It was clear that all members of the group had been present throughout their attack, because Seath's blood was mixed with small traces of their DNA throughout the trailer. None of them had showed remorse or tried to back out of the plan. In June of 2012, Kyle, Amber, Justin, and Charlie received a life sentence for Seath's murder. James Havens was charged as an accessory to murder and was able to receive a reduced sentence in exchange for a guilty plea. It was clear that Michael Bargo had been the ringleader, and for that, he was sentenced to death, becoming the youngest death row inmate in the state of Florida. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and I really appreciate you listening today. If you are new to listening to 10-Minute Murder, welcome. Do me a quick favor. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now so that you can more easily find the podcast in the future, and it helps you go back and listen to previous episodes if you subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube, please know that there are lots more episodes available not on YouTube. That's a good place to listen. That's a cool place. You can listen there. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying there are a lot more episodes available on podcast listening apps. You can also connect with me on social media to see the pictures of what we talk about here in the podcast. It's never gross and graphic stuff, though. So If you like this episode, leave a rating and review any place that's possible because your feedback goes a long way to helping this show grow. All right, now let's read an email from one of you that listens. Hey, Joe, OG listener here, but this is the first time emailing you. Love the podcast, and I try to share it with people as often as I can while also not looking like a crazy person. I have a question. I know in order to do this podcast, you probably read a lot of current news and keep up to date with what's going on in the world. Is there anything going on right now that is keeping you up at night? Melissa in Beaumont, Texas. Melissa, thank you for the email. And yes, and since you didn't specify true crime, I'll talk about what's not related to true crime that's keeping me up at night. A couple of things. First of all, the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing. Why won't that end? I don't know why people are still talking about it. It was a story for a minute, but we're like a week past it now. Why are we still talking about this? I mean, it could be because Taylor Swift is the biggest thing in entertainment news right now and has been for the last, I don't know how many years. She's massive. So anything she does or says makes news. But this Travis Kelce angle, I'm a little bit tired of it. It doesn't concern me like the government shutdown thing concerns me. So I'm not going to get political here, but that is looming at the time that I'm recording this podcast. So who knows what's going to happen with that. So I've tried to avoid the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce news stories and figure out what's going on with the world of government shutdown. And neither of those really keep me up at night. But I will tell you what does currently in the news. And that's how inept the Alabama football team offense seems to be. That might be bothering me more than anything. All right, let me check my notes. That is it. That's all there is for today. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. Please subscribe wherever you're listening. If you have questions, comments, concerns, joe@10minutemurder.com. Thank you so much for listening to 10 Minute Murder.